This is You Are Too Beautiful by Richard Rodgers and Lorenz Hart. Now what I want to talk about are how to find the color tones, all right? So because I know that a lot of people have trouble with that, particularly with flat 9, sharp 11s, sharp 5s. Where are they, in the chord? And you have to be able to find them in order to get the full sound out of the melody, out of the chordal progression, I mean. So we're going to start here now. Generally, I talk about adding ninths whenever possible. So even here on the first chord, which is D minor 7, that'd be the ninth. Now, how do we know it's the ninth? Because it's always one step above the octave, right? So the ninth is there. So if you look to where your root is and where the octave is, then the ninth is going to be one up. I mean, technically, you could say that it's down there and play the chord like that without the root, and then say the bass player plays the root and you're adding the ninth there, but you're getting that warmer sound, you see? There's more color in the chord, so it's always one whole step above the octave. And if it's a flat 9, it's a half step above the octave. If it's a sharp 9, it's a whole step and a half, so 3 half steps. So that'd be the D7 sharp 9, this would be the D9, this would be the D7 flat 9, okay? So now this is a D, the first chord calls for a D minor 7. So if I want to add the ninth, I'm going to add it with the right hand like that. And I'm going to get this. Now the next chord is the G7, so we know that sounds like that. But I always say put some color, some more personality into the dominant 7th chords in particular. So I'm going to do this. So I added the flat 9. So even just adding a 9 is going to do something, but there's the adding the ninth because it's right there, all right? So I can play it like that or like that. I'm adding a 13 here. Technically, you can look at it as a 6, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But if I play the dominant 7th down there and I put that in, I'm playing a G13. Now I'm adding a 9 there. So see how much more colorful it sounds than just a plain dominant 7th? That's a plain dominant 7th. But this now, it sounds like this.
Color.
Now this one here, okay. So we have an E minor 7. They're going to an A7. Now, if you just play the melody note in the root, you can see that melody note is already a flat 9, right? How do we know that? This is the octave again. It's a half step above, right? So you really want to orient yourself to that octave, and half step above is the flat 9. So now to add some color to that, this would be a regular A7. They're saying try, or they're suggesting trying an augmented fifth. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So it's that note. So you have to find these notes in the scale of the chord that you're playing. Right. So like if you're playing an A7, you're going to play an A major scale and you're going to find it. There's 5, so here's augmented fifth. So I put that in. So to a degree, it really takes your knowledge of the keyboard and the piano to find these. If they're not automatic, then the more you work the process of finding them and then playing it over and over again, eventually they'll start to become more automatic because your ear adapts to it, and also the feeling in your hands, and also you see it on the keyboard. Like I see A7, I know that's a sharp 5. Just visually I know it is because I know what my intervals are, right? Root 3rd, 5th, root 3rd, 5th, 7th, flat 7, root 3rd, 5th, natural 7. So the notes in between, I know this is a 2, right? Or a 9. Up here it's a 9, it's one above. I know this is the 3, I know this is the 4th, or it's the 11th up here, and so on. This is the 5th, this is the augmented 5th, this is the flat 5, right? There it is, you can see it visually. It's laid out for you on the keyboard. So now, continuing. And I put the flat 9 in there that time. So there's my chord. I've got the root. That, of course, is a flatted 7th. I've got the 3rd. I've got the 13 there. Now, if I want to make that an augmented, I can do it like that. So you hear the difference in the sound? Or, see, there's a little more tension in that that's pulling me down to that 9th again of the D minor, right? Because remember, remember that all tension chords, the notes within them, generally are pulling chromatically down or up. You know, downward or upward. So this one's going to pull downward like this, and this one is going to move down to here, and we're back to a D minor again. Now here's another. This is an exact match to this, right? So I can either use a 13 like that or a 13 like that. See? So I'd have this. So it's either this, down, the whole step is there. So now I have root 7th, 3rd, 6th, or 13, and flat 9. If I want to make it augmented, I go there. So there again. So that's the chord. That wants to resolve down to here. So now that resolves to the 9 of the C major 7 chord. See, then we have, now you have, of course, a G minor 7 to a C7 flat 9, and then continuing. Now this chord is interesting. See, I do something like that because I know I can do it. It's a B flat 9 chord. So there's the B flat root flat 7. Here's the 9. We know it's, again, one whole step above the root, or the octave, right? And then there's the melody note. But now I can add a sharp 11 here, like if I want. And I can even add a 3rd in there if I want. Look at that cluster that I have there. But it sounds fine, right?
Yeah.
You're liking, it's getting more color into the chord. Then here's a C6 over E, so I go. Now here's that's a 9, isn't it? On the A minor 7. It goes to the 9th. The melody goes to the 9th. So I can do this if I want. Okay, what did I do? What I did was I took that melody note of the 9th, and rather than it being root 3rd, 5th, 7th, and we know it's a 9th, rather than saying I'm going to have a 9th hit on that beat with that chord, I'm going to put a diminished chord a half step below it. And that 9th is going to fit it because it's one of the notes in the chord. See, it isn't a note in an A minor 7, it's a note in an A minor 9, but I know that I can put a diminished there and then resolve it to that C, which now would be the 3rd of the chord. You with me on that? So there's a place you can use a substitute. Then you have, now here, now there's a plain G7 like that. There's no 5th in it, but I mean, you don't need it. Got the 3rd there. But now say I want to, the general rule is to dress up your dominant 7ths and make them more colorful. So I will go, let's see, where was I? Okay. I'll go like this. And I'll put that in. See, now I'm adding 2 color tones. I'm changing this 7th up here down to a half step to a 13th. How do I know that's a 13th? Well, because we know that's an 8. The octave is an 8. 9, 10, 11, 12, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we just know that all 6s, 6th step of the scale above the octave, above the 7th, are going to be a 13th.
Right.
Eventually begin to just know where they are. There's an F 13th, there's an A flat 13th, and so on. You know where those 13ths are. So what I added was a 13th, and I also added a flat 9. Now how do we know that's a flat 9? Well, there's the octave. It's a G7, right? So that's a half step above the G, the octave. So it's a flat 9. There's the 13. So now I have this really colorful chord sounding like C. Goes to there. Right? Now here I go to that. Now that's an A7, but I've added the flat 9 there, and I've added a flat 5 here. Now you could also say, well, that's a sharp 11. Now how do we know that that's a flat 5? Let's see. We're on an A7, right? So how do we know it's a flat 5? Well, we play the scale. We see that's half step lower than the 5th, so it's a flat 5. How do we know it's a sharp 11? Well, if we go 8, 9, 10, 11 in the A major scale, right? That's a half step above the 11, makes it a sharp 11. So that's both you can think of it as a flatted fifth or a sharp 11. So now it repeats. Okay, so the same pattern repeats. Now when we get, I'm going to go right to the last section to show you the substitutes chords there. So we'll go through the bridge quickly. Here's the bridge. Now there I put in a 13th there. Okay, now here's your substitutes. Okay, so now that just created a 2-5 progression, like starting on an F sharp half diminished. So that substitutes now for that D minor chord. All right, so that's a minor 7 flat 5, which is a half diminished. So that's the substitute. Now up here, the B7 is augmented. There's the augmented fifth, and then sharp 9 up here. So that's the voicing. So that creates a 2-5 descending, coming down the scale instead of up. Here we're going up. We're going D minor, G7, E minor. So that's an ascending progression. Now we have a descending progression on a substitute chord. You could even do a tritone substitute like this. What did I do? I put in a tritone substitute for the B7. Okay? Now that means that I went up a flatted fifth there, and I played an F7 chord, but with color in it. So I've got an F7 now with a 9, a sharp 11 again, and a 13 here in the melody. And you do the same process of counting up on the scale to find those. So, yeah. So, see the difference? Okay. So that's just a short lesson on color tones, okay?
Yeah, wonderful.